Client comes in and says, I have a pension, but I don't want to share it. It's mine. I worked. And we have to explain to the client, well, the law says you're going to share it. If you don't want to share it, we can offer something else in lieu of the pension. Well, what else can we do to meet those feelings in a way that's equitable and fair for the other side?
Hey everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Bar podcast. I'm your host, Denisa Tova, and today's guest is razor sharp and I'd say deeply thoughtful. Two things you want in a family law attorney for sure. Adam Schneid is a partner at Most Schneid, PC, and he's a graduate of both Cornell and Cardozo School of Law, where he basically cleaned up on every academic honor you can think of. But today, as usual, we're going beyond the resume, and I am curious to know what drives him, his story, what keeps him grounded, how he handles the emotional weight of his work, and just who he is outside of his title. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. And we've worked together on different matters over the past few years now, and I appreciate the opportunity to kind of get to know you a little better, and you'll get to know me a little better.
You know, that's what this is about. You know, we do sometimes we work together for a hot minute, and that's part of our identity. Certainly that's not all of it. And that's what has been so wonderful about this podcast is really getting to know people and what drives them. So take me back to when you first decided or wanted to become a lawyer.
Oh, wow. We're going back to high school. It was something that I wanted to do. I had some family members who were lawyers, and I liked the idea. I guess when I was younger, there's like the Matlock show, right? And then we had Law and
Yep.
Order. And then, the idea that you can do that and really make a difference, and it seemed fun and exciting. TV makes it seem more fun and exciting than it actually is. But so I went to college with the idea that I wanted to become a lawyer. And so that was my goal. And going to college, I became a lawyer, and that's what I've been doing since. And I, for the most part, really love my job. It's a good thing. I get to help people. I have sometimes things are difficult in terms of how you want to approach a question. A lot of what I do is the same thing every day with different numbers, different people. And then sometimes what I do is something novel or different or that I haven't seen before. And those are the fun cases for me. That's what really gets me going and excited.
So so you watched some of the known shows known to us in high school, and you're right. Sometimes that's different from the reality. What about before then? Take me back to, I don't know, middle school, elementary school. What were you into?
What was I into in elementary school? I don't even know how to answer that question. Sesame Street, I guess I don't know when that falls in. Maybe that was earlier.
Yeah.
So elementary school is a hard question. That was a long time ago. I guess if I could move you into high school, at least I had activities that were more regular there. I was involved in Model Congress, which you got to debate. And that was one of the skills that I liked. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to be a lawyer. I liked and enjoy public speaking. I enjoy crafting arguments. As to elementary school and middle school, I can't tell you how that crafted and what I became and why I became a lawyer because of that. Um, that I can't, that's a hard question.
Yeah, it was more so, you know, what's interesting is, and I sort of heard that theory not that long ago. If you could picture yourself, and maybe it's not, you know, when you're 6, 7, 8 years old, because who knows, but maybe 10 or 12, was there a moment when you sort of felt like excited, felt like you're sort of on top of the world? It was just a moment. Like for me, I remember pretending I was a teacher. And, you know, so here I am today when I do teach, when I'm explaining something, it fills me up in the same way. And it was great to sort of find that connection. So when you say, you know what, I enjoy crafting arguments, that was back then. And is that something that and probably other parts as well, the debating, is that something that you've carried through till today? So as you are doing this work, you feel like it has been aligned. This is the work that you were meant to do.
Yeah, I think uh, A successful lawyer tries to craft an argument and a narrative that makes sense. When you have a dispute, both sides, both individuals believe in what they want and have a reason for it. And you want to craft narrative as to why your version of events is right and theirs is wrong, or you should win and they should lose. And a lot of that is not just like 1 + 1 = 2, but it's the other facts that we choose to weave in and the way we approach the issue that we're discussing, whether it's a financial issue, a retirement issue, or something else. And that narrative is really what guides our storytelling, our arguments. At the end of the day, I'm making these arguments to litigants, to individuals in the context of a settlement meeting, to judges, and I want them both to like my argument and to like my client and to think it makes sense. Judges are real people. And so if I have something that might be right on the law, but it just feels wrong, like if I articulate something and the law says it should be A, but A feels like a really unfair result, the judge is going to try to avoid A. So my job is to say not only is A right, but it's the fair result too. And here's why it's reasonable and here's why it's fair. And so when I craft the arguments, I'm trying to be convincing to convince you that my side should win. So yes, back when I was in high school and we had the debates for when we had the club model Congress, we had to argue about which side should win on a particular point and why. And that's the same thing we do every day as lawyers.
This is an interesting one, like experts sometimes, they find themselves, so they represent, if they're hired to represent one side, a client and with an attorney, would you, and I'm not saying you, but the thought sometimes is, wait a second, you've argued something that was completely different, last month when you were representing one spouse, but today on another case, you're arguing the exact opposite. So does it have to do more with the set of circumstances, rather than sort of personal belief or conviction, what is reasonable?
Sure. So you're right. My job is to take my clients where I find them and to advocate for their position. And sometimes I find myself on the opposite side of an issue. And my job as to what is reasonable in advocacy is to try to convince the judge or whoever it is I'm trying to convince that this set of facts should go the other way. And here's why. If I'm doing something, there's a reason, right? Well, why should I win? I have to be able to explain that to you, to articulate pretty quickly and clearly. And if I can't do that, I don't deserve to win the argument. But sometimes we're on the opposite side of the same issue the next week, and there are some subtle differences. Sometimes it's the same, and the issue really belongs one way, and there's one right answer, and there's nothing I can do. But sometimes the issue can be approached in different ways, and there's no right answer, or there are other facts that change the outcome. And we want to look for those other facts to explain why this case is different from last week. It also helps if you're dealing with other parties. It's a different client. It's a different business. It's a different issue. It's a different judge, hopefully, different lawyer on the other side. But you're right. If the facts are identical 2 weeks in a row, it's hard to argue the other side. But we try. We do it. Our goal is to advocate for our clients, and we do that in a meaningful way when when you could take a reasoned position on both sides. I won't ever take a position that I don't think is reasonable, where I don't think I should win. I'm not going to do things just because my client wants it, but there's no way I'm going to win. I don't want to waste my client's money, and I don't want to take a position that I think I'm going to lose. I charge my client a lot of money for taking that position. And then if we're going to lose, and I think we're going to lose, that's not a good use of resources.
That is as direct and honest response as it can be. I really appreciate you saying that, because oftentimes I've been discussing with my guests, attorney guests, how do you handle the emotional aspect, right? Because the other stuff is pretty clear cut and dry when it comes to dividing assets. Not easy, but that's just what it is. The minute you bring in emotions, they see it from completely different lens. And I'm wondering, so when you do meet with a client the first time and you give them your spiel about what you just discussed, does that help, temper some of those emotions and just sort of set the right expectations?
I think it does. There's a cost for everything we do. Client comes in and says, I have a pension, but I don't want to share it. It's mine. I worked. And we have to explain to the client, well, the law says you're going to share it. If you don't want to share it, we can offer something else in lieu of the pension. Let's present value the pension, and now it's worth X dollars, and you have to give your spouse half, or at least half of the marital portion. Instead of giving her half of X dollars of pension money, let's give her a different asset because you have a sentimental attachment to the pension. So I would say, Denisa, can you help me? I need to present value my pension. My client doesn't want to share it, but we have to get a result that the other side is both going to agree to. And if we don't agree, that the judge can get on board with. So what can we do? So that's like an example of if you have a defined benefit pension. I worked for a union, or worked in a job that paid me a certain amount of money every month when I retire. I feel like that's mine, and I don't want to give that up. Well, what else can we do to meet those feelings in a way that's equitable and fair for the other side? No one is happy getting divorced. No one feels like when they're divorced, like, this is great, this is a great time. No, this is horrible for everyone involved. Whether you want it, you don't want it, you're now physically separating from somebody who at some point, I hope you loved. You're now dividing up your money, and sometimes you just don't want to part with pension or whatever it is. And so we have to find other ways to get there. But no, I have to explain to my client, we're not going to spend an enormous amount of money to fight for something where we're going to lose. The other thing for matrimonial is there's fee shifting provisions. So if I take a provision, or I take a position, sorry, on something that I am not going to win, and there's no chance I'm going to win, I know I'm going to lose, and I force us to a trial on something that we deserve to lose, and then we lose, well, the other side's going to say, hey, you made me waste all this money. Now, not only do you have to pay your own lawyer, but you have to pay my lawyer. And so I explain this to my clients from the beginning. There's a lot of gray, but if we know we're going to lose, we're not going to go to trial and risk all this money for something that we're going to lose anyway. So the example I gave as a pension is something that my clients do care about. And there's sometimes a different way to get there. Well, I have a 401k and I have a pension. My 401k is worth 500,000. My defined benefit pension, we present valued it, it's worth 550. We can transfer $25,000 of retirement assets, or I can tax impact the money and make us even.
Who wins arguments at home?
In my home?
Yeah.
Well, so I myself am divorced, so I don't have anyone to argue with in my home anymore. So I understand what my clients go through when they get divorced, and what that means, and how that feels. So it used to be my ex-wife would win, but now here I am, and I can understand where my clients are coming from.
Yeah, you have a personal perspective.
It
Yeah.
really it helps. Before I was doing matrimonial law, before I had children, and I understand, like, I've seen little kids before, but then you have your own kids and you have a different perspective. And now that I've been divorced, I have a different perspective. And even in my own divorce, you want to try to avoid fighting over things when you're going to lose. And there's a big cost to litigate, to fight. And so I want to reserve those costs for when things are gray, when if I win this argument, I'm going to get more money than my legal fees cost. I never want to fight for something that I think I'm going to lose. So one of the things we discuss with clients each step of the way is, what do you want to spend and what are you hoping to get? It has to make sense economically if it's about money. Now, for children, there is no right answer on how much it would cost, right? For your kids to be in the right environment, there's no right amount of money to spend. For money, there is. You don't want to spend $2 to fight over $1.
So how old are your children?
My children are 6 and 9. They have late birthdays, so they're going into 2nd grade and going into 5th grade.
And what are they into?
The older one does soccer and tennis. The younger one, also the same thing, actually. Those are the sports they like.
Oh, they like it. They actually
They
enjoy
like
it.
it. They like it. Those are my older one does other sports as well, but soccer and tennis are the ones that he's most interested in. And my little one, he's little, he also likes Legos.
Oh, those are great. Oh my gosh. Do you build with, do you build Legos too?
I help him a little bit, but he's gotten to the point where he can kind of like do his own thing and he can follow the instructions and then he'll build the Lego set and then he takes it apart and they like changes it and he will really do that on his own at this point. But I will help him when he needs.
I'm curious as a parent, that's always a dilemma, with the technology. It's just moving with the speed of light and AI and kids having access to electronics. It's just astounding. Very different than our generation, and it's not like we're old. What do you have how do you try to balance it knowing that, your kids pretty much have access to anything they want in the outside world when they're not supervised? Do you have those kinds of conversations with them about I don't even know if they have electronic devices like phones, tablets?
Sure. So my kids are still young, so it's less of an issue for them. Um, as they get older, I think that is a bigger issue. My 6-year-old, he sometimes will play a game on my phone, but beyond that, he doesn't really use electronics. Um, he'll watch TV and watch YouTube and things like that, but we kind of see what he's watching. My older one will talk to friends, but we know who he's talking to, but they're not on social media yet. They're not doing some of the things that they might start doing in a couple of years, which I think is really the genesis of your question. So I
Yeah.
guess we'll have to see.
Yes. Yes, it is a challenge. I say I personally believe the conversation starts at home, but it's almost normalizing it. And I've had that. I mean, my kids are older, and we've always had we've had open discussions, at a dinner table to the point where they're like, "Oh my gosh, mom, this is embarrassing." No, we'll we'll talk about anything. So, yeah, that's do you has your perspective when you're dealing with clients who have children, as you became parent yourself, how did it change your perspective on your work? In what ways?
Um, that it happened gradually. So there's
Hmm.
an understanding, when you have little kids, like what their needs are in a way maybe you didn't appreciate before, and how they act when they're tired or cranky. That before I had kids, maybe I didn't really fully appreciate. And then understanding how like children are real people and they have thoughts and desires, and just because you say something does not mean they want to do that. And so when we're trying to craft, whether it's a custody agreement or what activities the kids are going to do, there has to be realization that the kids have to have buy-in for whatever the activity is. You try taking an 8-year-old to soccer and the kid says, I'm not playing. And you'll quickly learn how that doesn't really work because the kid just doesn't do it.
Yeah.
And so we make these agreements with a bunch of adults in the room and expect the kids to just do what we say, and it does not always play out that way. So it's important that the things we're talking about, things the kids want to do that they like, that these are the activities that we're picking for them, that they themselves want these activities.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you say, I know you don't want to do any activity, you have to pick one, but there has to be some sort of realization that kids have their own attitudes, and especially as they get older, they really do vote with their feet. And
Mm.
so if at it's hard if one of the parents is very strict, they're going to want to sometimes want to go to the less strict parent. And so you get these perverse incentives as a divorced parent, um, where you want what's best for your child, but at the same time, you don't want your child to go to the other parent where maybe they don't care about homework, or they get to stay up late, or they get chocolate for dinner, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And there's almost this tit for tat where you have to kind of balance that. And so that's something that we try to address when we're doing an agreement or we're settling a case, try to avoid that to the extent possible, because that's not what's best for kids. And we want to avoid that dynamic from occurring.
Hmm. Really paying attention to their voice, and rather than treating them like, assets, pawns, and yeah, that's I think, what I've learned, and as because I've co-parented for many, many years, and have done or have participated in mediation processes. So I've seen it where um kids have a tendency to recover much faster when parents are not in conflict, even if it's a divorce. So, and not feeling that they're stuck in the middle, they have to choose. And at the end of the day, they're you came from both parents. So to call the other a name, it sort of makes them feel like, well, if you call him this, then what does that leave me? So yeah, this is great what you're saying. I really appreciate that. If I'm curious, you're very passionate about what you do, obviously. If you couldn't practice law, what would you do?
Oh, wow, that is a really hard question. Um, I don't know. I honestly, I haven't thought in my entire adult life of doing a job other than law. So I don't know what that would be, what that would mean. Um, I really don't know the answer. I enjoy law because I enjoy the analytical side. I enjoy the tough questions, and I don't know what type of job would do that for me. I'm sure there are a lot out there, but I'd have to figure that out, and I don't have an off-the-cuff response for that. I've wanted to be a lawyer since I was in high school, so I haven't had like a I mean, if you asked me in high school before I wanted to be a lawyer, I thought, well, maybe I'll be a doctor. But now I'm not going back to becoming a doctor. You know, you spend too many years doing one thing, it's kind of hard to start from scratch and do something different. But, that's actually what I ask clients to do all the time. I have someone that stays at home with their kids, and we tell them, "You've been home for 15 years, now you have to go reinvent yourself."
Mm.
And so, sometimes that means just, like, finding a job, sometimes that means go to a vocational evaluator to help you figure out what your skill set is. Just because you were a stay-at-home parent, it doesn't mean you don't have a skill set. We have to figure out what type of skills you have and match those with jobs that are available. And I've seen people go back to the workforce and become enormously successful. And I've seen people come back and struggle. And it really depends on a lot of different factors. So I don't have a good answer for that, but I will keep that in mind when I tell a client of mine that's been out of the workforce for 15 years that they have to get a job and what that really means. Because it's a tough question for me to answer, and it's a tough question for my clients that are in the same position quite frequently.
What do you do when you're not working?
When I'm not working, well, I have my kids half the time. I like to play tennis. I have a group once a week. Um, a lot of my time is around my kids. So even if I don't have them, I'll go to their activities on the weekends, and that ends up using up a lot of my free time. Is really where it goes. So other than tennis and the kids' activities, there's not a ton of time remaining.
It's only so many hours. Yeah, I am so engrossed. Somebody would call it work, but to me, it's learning and growing. So when I'm behind a computer at 4 a.m., doesn't mean that I'm reviewing a report. It's I'm soaking up all the, AI advances and, it, any other areas that interest me. And so we're fortunate that we have access to information so easily now. I probably wouldn't know what to do with myself if I could not learn. So that's I can see you sort of go, go, go. And if you enjoy what you're doing between that and the family, there's really not, maybe it doesn't even feel like you should be doing something else. I'm curious because you're like a scholar. What is a what is a law, a particular law that you would change, and why within your field?
Particular law that I would change and why. I don't really like the maintenance guidelines. I think they're kind of rigid to some extent, and when your income is lower and dictates a number, I think sometimes it's really hard to live, especially they changed the tax code a few years ago, so maintenance is no longer tax deductible. And they have these numbers, and so if you're paying child support and you're paying maintenance, and you're near these caps that the court would apply, there's really not a lot left over. But then, equal measure, as you start going up the income ladder, then these caps that they're applying for maintenance, they seem like they also don't seem fair. So before we used to kind of had rules of thumbs and we look at what people really lived and what they needed. And now it feels that we're almost using these calculations as like, this is what you're going to get. And there's no wiggle room there. And I think that's really not fair the way it gets applied to a lot of people. And maybe it's better than having no guidelines, but it's really changed, I think, the way judges listen to arguments as to why you should apply them or not apply them. There's this reflexiveness just to apply the guidelines. And so I don't really like them for that reason. Although, when you're meeting with someone in a consult and you could just plug their income into a computer and spit out what the numbers should be, that's helpful.
Yeah.
But I just don't always know that the end result is as fair as it could be.
It really doesn't sound like this is not a out of a box, situation. You're dealing with so many pieces, and I really admire your profession. Um, we're t- we're only talking about a few issues on the surface, but you are impacting someone's life, and as you know personally. So this is not a it's not a job. It is a career. So on a parting note, what would be your advice to incoming attorneys?
Make sure this is what you want to do and pick a field that you like because you're really going to spend a lot of your time as a young lawyer and then as a senior lawyer doing this one field.
Mm.
And it's so much of your life, you have to like it. There are fields of law that I couldn't do. You know, there are people that prosecute criminals for heinous things, and that is something that I couldn't stomach. But for others, that's a great job, and they're doing a great thing by keeping criminals off the street. But make sure whatever field of law you're choosing is one that you enjoy and you like and you feel passionate about, because to spend this many hours doing something, you have to like what you do.
It shows. As I'm talking to you and our previous work, it through your energy and again the passion. I say that word again. It shows that you are really into and ingrained in what you do. A lot of what we talked about ties back to your work. Again, it feels like a career, and there's a difference because I deal with so many other practitioners, attorneys. You see those who are just constantly tired and on edge, and given the enormity and the responsibility of what they do, it's understandable, but it's just they're just burned out. But so and I'm sure there are times like these. So I really, really appreciate your commitment to this profession, and it's been a real pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed our time.
So thank you again. And for those of you who would like to know how to connect with Adam, make sure that you click on the link below. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Beyond the Bar podcast. Make sure that you follow us on all social media channel. And until next time, stay curious and stay inspired.